Page 419. My father sent his message by cable, because there's not telephones, remember? Guji took my father's written message down to the telegraph office. I watched the crowd as they waited for the Japanese government's reply. The 5 representatives came into our house several times that day to ask if an answer had been received. Anytime the gate 420. Anytime the gate opened, the crowd tried to charge inside. Finally, the answer came from the Japanese government. It was no. My father could not issue that many visas to Japan. For the next 2 days, he thought about what to do. 100 more Jewish refugees joined the crowd. My father sent a second message to his government and asked the answer again. The answer was no. He still couldn't go outside. My little brother Haruki cried often because we were running out of milk. I grew tired of staying indoors. I asked my father constantly, why are these people here? What do they want? Why do they have to be here, and who are they? There's a picture on the right of the family on 421. My father always took the time to explain everything to me. He said the refugees needed his help, that they needed permission from him to go to another part of the world where they would be safe. I cannot help these people yet, he calmly told me, but when the time comes, I will help them all that I can. My father cabled his superiors yet a third time. That's how he sends messages. And I know the answer by the look in his eyes. That night, he said to my mother, I have to do something. I may have to disobey my government, but if I don't, I will be disobeying God. The next morning, he brought the family together and asked what he should do. This was the first time he ever asked all of us to help him with anything. My mother and auntie had already made up their minds. They said we had to think about the people outside before we thought about ourselves. And that is what my parents had always told me, that I must think as if I were in someone else's place. If I were one of those children out there, what would I want someone to do for me? Page 422. I said to my father, if we don't help him, wouldn't we die? If we don't help them, wouldn't we die? With the entire family in agreement, I could tell a huge weight was lifted off my father's shoulders. His voice was firm as he told us, I will start helping these people. Outside, the crowd went quietly as my father spoke, with Borislav in translating. I will issue visas to each and every one of you to the last, so please wait patiently. The crowd stood frozen for a second. Then the refugees burst into cheers. Grown-ups embraced each other, and some reached to the sky. Fathers and mothers hugged their children, and I was especially glad for the children. My father opened the garage door, and the crowd tried to rush in. To keep order, Borislav handed out cards with numbers. My father wrote out each visa by hand. After he finished each one, he looked into the eyes of the person receiving the visa and said, good luck. Refugees camped out at our favorite park, waiting to see my father. I was finally able to go outside. Chaiki and I played with the other children in our toy car. They pushed as we rode, and they rode as we pushed. We chased each other around the big trees. We did not speak the same language, but that didn't stop us. For about a month, there was always a line leading to the garage. Every day from early in the morning till late in the night, my father tried to write 300 visas. He watered down the ink to make it last. Guji and a young Jewish man helped out by stamping my father's name on the visas. My mother offered to help write the visas, but my father insisted he be the only one, so no one else could get in trouble, on page 423. So my mother watched the crowd and told my father how many there were still in line. One day, my father pressed down so hard on his fountain pen, the tip broke off. During that moment, I only saw him late at night. His eyes were always red, and he could hardly talk. While he slept, my mother massaged his arm, stiff and cramped from writing all day. Soon my father grew so tired he wanted to quit writing the visas, but my mother encouraged him to continue. Many people are still waiting, she said. Let's issue some more visas and save as many lives as we can. While the Germans approached from the west, the Soviets came from the east and took over Lithuania. They ordered my father to leave. So did the Japanese government, which reassigned him to Germany. Still, my father wrote the visas until we absolutely, isn't that ironic? He had to go to Germany. Yeah. Well, he was writing them as the Germans were coming. 1 second, sorry about the page. 424. He was writing them. Still, my father wrote the visas until we absolutely had to move out of the town. We stayed at a hotel for 2 days where my father still wrote visas for the many refugees who followed him there. Then it was time to leave Lithuania. Refugees had slept in the train station, crowded around my father. Some refugee men surrounded my father to protect him. He now just issued permission papers, blank pieces of paper with his signature. As the train pulled away, refugees ran alongside. My father still handed permission papers out the window. As the train picked up speed, he threw them out to waiting hands. The people in the front of the crowd looked into my father's eyes and cried, "We will never forget you. We will see you again." I gazed out the train window, watching Lithuania and the crowd of refugees fade away. I wondered if I would ever see them again. "Where are we going?" I asked my father. We are going to Berlin, he replied. Cheeky and I became very excited about going to the big city. I had so many questions for my father, but he fell asleep as soon as he settled into his seat. My mother and Auntie Satusko looked really tired too. Back then, I did not fully understand what the three of them had done or why it was so important, but now I do.